I have lived more than 60 years on this earth, long enough to witness every kind of scene this city can offer. But never did I imagine that an ordinary afternoon, just taking my old dog Rusty for a walk around our familiar corner, would become the most haunting memory of my life. That street was as noisy as ever. Car horns blared, buses hissed at stops before roaring off, and the smell of toasted bread drifted from a small shop near the gas station. People crowded the sidewalk, rushing past one another, each with a destination, each with their back turned to anything that didn't belong to them. I was no different, until I saw it. At the edge of the steps of an abandoned bus stop, there was a small shadow. At first, I thought it was nothing more than a rag left behind. But when the flicker of the streetlight fell across it, I saw it move, and my heart clenched. A puppy, a Doberman, not even a month old, small enough to fit into the palm of my hand. Its body was little more than skin and bones, black and tan fur matted with mud and dust. What froze me were its back legs, unable to stand, unable even to lift. It dragged itself forward, leaving two raw red streaks across the cold cement. It didn't whimper. It didn't bark. It only trembled, gasped for breath, and stared straight at me. Those eyes. I had never seen such a look, desperate yet pleading, as if it didn't know how else to ask for help, except to hold on to me with that fragile thread of hope. Rusty froze beside me, letting out a low growl. I stood there as if nailed to the ground. The city's noise vanished, leaving only that weak breathing echoing in my head. I watched it try to climb the step, front legs shaking, body swaying. It pushed one more time, then slipped back. Its tiny frame slammed against the cement. The sound of that impact turned my blood to ice. I stepped forward on instinct, but stopped at once when I heard the faintest whine. So thin, so fragile it seemed it might break in half. I didn't know who had abandoned it there, but one thing I knew for certain: it had been crushed by a wheel, a steel door, or some cruel blow. There was no way a creature so small had fallen into this state on its own. And the thought that human hands had tossed it onto the roadside made my blood boil. I turned away, perhaps out of fear, perhaps because I wasn't sure I had the strength to save another life. I had already lost my wife years ago in a hospital, forced to watch helplessly as she slipped away. I had promised myself I would never let my heart break like that again. But then a sound rose behind me. A scratching. I turned back. It was dragging itself toward me. Back legs scraping, leaving two faint trails across the dirt-stained pavement. Its chest heaved wildly, but its eyes never left mine. I wanted to shout, "Don't follow me! I can't do this!" But my throat locked. I just stood there, watching that tiny being fight to the very end, until it collapsed beneath the lamplight, its body trembling with every breath. In that moment, something inside me gave way. I realized I was standing at a crossroads, either walk away like the hundreds of people who had just passed by, or kneel down and do the one thing the whole world had refused. And if I walked away, I knew the image of that puppy would haunt me until my very last breath. I stood frozen beneath the yellow street lamp, my breath heavy, my chest pounding inside this old frame of mine. I had already turned away once. I had told myself, "Don't get involved. You don't have the strength anymore." But when I heard that faint scratching and then saw it dragging itself toward me, every wall I had built inside collapsed. I turned back, walking slowly toward it. Rusty pulled hard on the leash, growling low, reminding me this wasn't my problem. But the eyes of that puppy, barely a month old, no more, reached into the deepest part of me. There was no blame in them, no anger, only pleading. I knelt down, my knees pressing against the cold pavement. My hand stretched out, trembling the same way it had decades ago when I first held my newborn son. But the pup recoiled, a weak growl rising from its throat. It tried to press itself against the step, its whole body shaking with fear. In that moment, I remembered the day the hospital called me, telling me my wife had only hours left. I had run like a madman down those long hallways, clutching a small bouquet. And when I finally reached her room, she looked at me with the very same eyes this puppy now had. The eyes of someone who wanted to live, but was too exhausted to say it. Back then, I was helpless. I couldn't be helpless again. I opened my bag, searching. All I had left was half a turkey sandwich I'd bought from the little shop by the church. I tore off a piece and set it down a step away. At first, it didn't move. Its ears drooped, eyes fixed on me with suspicion. But the scent of meat in the breeze drew it forward, inch by inch. It lowered its head and licked a small bite. Then another. Its body shook, but in its eyes I saw something new, just the faintest spark of trust. I reached out again, gentler this time. The pup let out a sharp, broken cry, the sound cutting through me like glass. It scrambled backward, nearly hitting its head against the step to get away from my hand. I pulled back, exhaling hard, and in that moment, it became clear. It wasn't afraid of dying. It was afraid of being betrayed again. A young man passing by stopped, crouching down. "Your dog?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, but I can't leave it here." Minutes later, a middle-aged woman carrying groceries also stopped. She gasped when she saw the pup, covering her mouth with her hand. "Oh, Lord, that poor thing." The three of us formed a small circle around the tiny creature. The young man pulled a clean cardboard box from his trunk. The woman spread out a wool scarf inside for bedding. I lifted the pup carefully. It screamed, kicked, and its claws raked wildly as if I were about to hurt it. And then, something strange happened. Once we placed it inside the box and closed the lid gently, it stopped struggling. No more screams. It lay still, eyes half shut, breath ragged but steady, as if it finally understood that this time it was safe. I picked up the box, my hands trembling. Rusty walked beside me, unusually silent, ears lowered as though he too knew what was happening. I set the box on the passenger seat. As the engine started, I glanced through the small opening. Its eyes met mine one last time before closing in exhaustion. And in that look, I saw the truth. It was entrusting its fragile little life to me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. For the first time in years, tears slid down these wrinkled hands. My voice broke as I whispered, "All right, little one. This time, I won't give up." I drove through the city at night, the streetlights casting streaks of gold across the hood, dancing in the rearview mirror. Each time the tires hit a pothole, the cardboard box on the passenger seat rattled softly. I tilted my head, listening. From inside came only faint, labored breaths, sometimes broken by a whimper sharp as a needle. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My heart hammered, not because I feared crashing, but because I feared that fragile life would slip away before we made it to safety. Rusty lay in the back seat, unusually quiet, his head resting on the cushion, his eyes locked on the box. I had never seen my old dog so gentle. When the sign for Pet Emergency Hospital finally came into view, my chest loosened as if chains had fallen off. I slammed the brakes, scooped up the box, and rushed through the sliding glass doors. The smell of antiseptic and rubber gloves hit me at once. A nurse hurried over, her eyes widening as I opened the lid. "Oh, Lord," she whispered. She quickly lifted the pup out, wrapped her in a sterile towel, and disappeared behind the clinic doors. I stood rooted in the glaring hallway. Shoes clicked across the tile, machines beeped in a steady rhythm. I lowered myself into a hard plastic chair, hands clasped tight, unsure whether I was praying or simply holding myself together. When the doctor appeared, I shot to my feet. He was a man in his 50s, with graying hair and deep-set eyes. He motioned for me to follow. Hope lay on a steel table beneath the blinding surgical lamp. She trembled, eyes shut tight, a thin tube feeding oxygen into her nose. On the monitor, the X-ray glowed in stark black and white, lifeless and cold. The doctor pointed to the spine. His voice was steady but heavy. "You see this? Here. The spine is cracked. Several vertebrae have shifted. Many of the nerves are badly damaged." I nodded, my throat locked tight. He went on, slower this time, as if he needed me to truly understand. "She's only a month old. Her body is still so fragile, not built to endure a blow like this. I'd say she was hit by a car. There's maybe a 10, at most 20% chance she'll regain even partial mobility." I swallowed hard, my voice shaking. "And walking? Will she ever walk again?" The doctor exhaled. Silence fell heavy in the room, broken only by the rhythm of the ventilator. "The chances are very slim, but not zero. The only thing we can do is operate. Realign the spine and wait for her body to heal on its own. But you must be prepared. She may never walk normally again." I looked at Hope. So small, trembling on the cold steel, her chest still rising, still fighting for every breath. Under the harsh white light, she looked like a candle flickering in the wind, ready to be extinguished at any second. Without warning, my mind drifted back to that hospital room 10 years ago, when my wife lay motionless and the doctors told me the same words. "You must prepare yourself." I could do nothing but hold her hand until it turned cold. That helplessness had hollowed me out for a decade. But now, looking at Hope, I saw something different. She wasn't giving up. Every breath seemed like a defiance of death itself. Her eyes were half shut, but the corners of her mouth quivered as if to say, "I want to live. Don't let go of me." The doctor laid a hand gently on my shoulder. "Do you want to try? The surgery will be difficult, and the cost won't be small. But if it works, at least she could live without pain." I didn't need to think long. Tears welled in my eyes as I nodded hard. "Do everything you can. I won't abandon her." When I signed the consent papers, my hand shook so badly the pen skidded across the page. But I knew this wasn't just a signature for a surgery. It was a promise that this time I would not stand by and watch another life I loved slip away. The next morning, I returned to the hospital. The sky was still dark, fog draped across the street, and a faint glow spilled from the neon sign of the corner cafe. In my hands, I carried an old sweater, the one I used to wear back when Rusty was just a pup, hoping the familiar scent might bring Hope some comfort. A nurse met me at the door, her voice gentle but urgent. "You should say goodbye for now. We're about to take her into surgery." I stepped inside. Hope lay in a stainless steel cage, her eyes half open. When she saw me, her ears twitched, and her tiny tail stirred ever so slightly. I bent down, placed the sweater beside her, and whispered, "Hang in there, little one. I'll be right out here, waiting for you to come back." They wheeled her away. The door to the operating room swung shut, leaving me alone in the long, bright, sterile hallway. I sat on a hard chair, my fingers laced so tight my nails pressed into skin. The wall clock ticked, each tick like a hammer striking my temples. I had once sat like this before, years ago, outside the ER while my wife fought for her life. I had prayed for a miracle that never came, and now I prayed again. But this time for a small, broken creature with shattered legs. From behind the doors came the shuffle of shoes, the clink of metal, the steady beep of monitors. I imagined them cutting along her back, gloved hands moving through fragile bones. The thought twisted my stomach. 3 hours dragged on like a lifetime. I paced, sat, stood again. Rusty lay at my feet, lifting his old head now and then, his weary eyes pleading along with mine. At last, the doors swung open. The doctor emerged with dark circles under his eyes but a steady light in his gaze. He pulled off his mask and came toward me. "The surgery went well. We've stabilized the spine, but recovery will be long and there are still risks." My chest tightened. I nodded again and again, tears streaming unchecked down my cheeks. They led me into recovery. Under the harsh white light, Hope lay motionless. A long seam of stitches ran down her spine, black threads against damp fur. Small tubes surrounded her tiny body. Her breathing was ragged, each breath cutting into me like a blade. I couldn't look for long. My vision blurred. I turned to the wall, fists clenched against the chair. Then a sound pulled me back. A faint whimper. Hope opened her mouth slightly, licking her lips as if parched. A nurse set down a dish of soft food. At first she only stared, unmoving. Then, slowly, she tilted her head and licked once. Then again. Watching that, I broke. The tears poured, blinding me. I knew then, just a single lick was enough to tell me Hope wanted to live. I pressed my hand against the glass, my voice hoarse. "Good girl, little one. Good girl." In that room, thick with the smell of antiseptic, I felt a miracle begin to unfold. A tiny life, crushed under wheels and battered by fear, was still choosing to stand with the living. And I promised myself, this time, no matter the cost, I would not let that miracle slip away. The first day after surgery, Hope lay motionless beneath a thin blanket. Only her tiny chest moved, rising and falling like a candle in the wind. I sat outside, watching through the glass, one question echoing in my head. Would she make it through? I had brought an old sweater, its collar worn from years of winter walks with Rusty. I placed it beside Hope, praying the familiar scent might soothe her. When the nurse opened the cage and set it down, I saw her turn her head, pressing her nose into the wool as if searching for warmth. My heart clenched. Every day I was there. I sat for hours in the waiting room, pretending to read the paper, though my eyes never followed a single word. From time to time, the nurse would motion me in. I would sit by her cage, speaking softly, telling Hope about the street where I grew up, about the little yard where Rusty used to chase squirrels. She didn't understand the words, but her eyes followed the movement of my lips as if those sounds pulled her away from the pain in her back. The doctor began therapy. Tiny acupuncture needles pierced her fragile skin. A red laser beam swept across her spine. I stood close, gripping the table edge, terrified that every touch might hurt her more. But Hope didn't cry. She only closed her eyes, enduring in silence, her ears trembling. One afternoon, a boy about 8 came with his mother. After hearing about Hope, he quietly pulled a small teddy bear from his backpack and set it in front of her cage. I watched as Hope's frail paw brushed against the toy, then drew it close to her chest as if hugging a friend. I couldn't hold back the tears. Word of Hope spread. People began stopping by, leaving soft blankets, food, and even handwritten cards. One letter carried shaky words. "Don't give up, little one. We believe you'll stand again someday." I read it over and over until I knew it by heart. And then the miracle came. One morning, as I stepped into the room, Hope lifted her head. Her eyes lit up, and her tiny tail moved. Not much, just a few trembling beats, but to me it was like watching the sun rise inside a room that smelled of medicine. I leaned against her cage, tears soaking my sleeve. That was the day I named her Hope, because through it all, she had become the very meaning of the word. In the days that followed, she ate more. She began sitting up on her front legs, though her back legs still wouldn't move. Each time she pulled herself upright, her eyes shone as if declaring victory. The nurses fell in love with her too, stopping by often to stroke her head, calling her by her new name. One evening, I sat alone in the waiting room, the sunset spilling through the glass. I thought about the losses behind me and realized something strange. I had come here to save Hope, but in truth, she was saving me. She was teaching me patience. She was teaching me that even when the body is broken, the heart can still find a reason to beat again. On the 10th day, when I walked in, Hope braced on her front legs, tilted her head, and let out a bark. It was faint, fractured, but to me it was the most beautiful music I had ever heard. The whole hospital stopped, everyone turning toward her, and then laughter broke out. Soft, emotional laughter. I knelt down, pressing my forehead to the bars, whispering, "Good girl, Hope. You did it." In that moment, I knew. The road ahead would be long, but she had already won her first battle. She had chosen life, and I would walk with her to the very end of that road. 6 weeks after the surgery, the doctor called me into the recovery room. He smiled, holding a small metal frame with 2 shiny wheels. "It's time to try Hope in a wheelchair. It won't be easy, but it's the best way for her muscles to start working again." I looked at the tiny chair, my heart tightening. Before me was something both hopeful and cruel. It reminded me that Hope's body had been changed forever. But I also knew, if she was to have a real life, this was a step we had to take. They placed the frame on the floor and gently slipped Hope's lifeless back legs into the straps. At first, she thrashed, panicked, trying to escape. I bent down, whispering in her ear, my hand stroking her back. "It's all right, little one. I'm right here." She stood unsteady, her body swaying. One step. Then she toppled sideways. I rushed forward to catch her, my chest aching. The nurse gave me a reassuring smile. "Don't worry. The first time is always like this. Let's try again." Hope tried again, fell again. A third time, she managed one more step before collapsing flat on the floor. I caught a flicker of weariness in her eyes. For a moment, I wanted to rip the chair off her, hold her close and say, "Enough, no more." But then I remembered years ago, when my son first learned to ride a bicycle. He too had fallen again and again in our driveway. I had wanted to scoop him up, but my wife placed her hand on my shoulder and said, "Let him stand on his own. Some lessons no one else can carry for him." I drew a deep breath, wiped the sweat from Hope's brow, and whispered, "One more time. You can do it." And then the miracle came. Hope steadied herself. The small wheels rolled forward slowly, carefully. 1 step, 2, then 3. Her little tail wagged, her eyes lit up, and then she barked, clear and strong. The whole room froze, then burst into applause, cheers, and laughter. I crumpled to my knees, tears streaming down my face. I had never thought I'd hear my own laughter echo through a hospital again. But that day, I laughed through tears. A smile I thought I had buried the day I lost my wife found its way back. That same day, I signed the adoption papers. Hope was no longer just a patient. She was family. When I brought her home to my apartment, Rusty was waiting at the door. He sniffed at the wheelchair, snorted, then turned and licked Hope gently on the ear. My throat tightened, my heart filling with something I thought I'd lost forever. Peace. The apartment, once filled only with the ticking of a clock, now echoed with the sound of wheels rolling on the wood floor, sharp little barks and soft thuds as Hope eagerly explored every corner. I sat in my old armchair, watching Rusty by the window, and Hope circling the kitchen table in her chair. Inside my chest, something flickered back to life. That night, as I prepared for bed, Hope wheeled up beside me, rested her head on the mattress, and looked at me with shining eyes. Rusty climbed up too, curling at the foot of the bed. For the first time in years, the house no longer felt empty. It was alive, warm, filled with the breath of love. In the darkness, I whispered, "Welcome home, Hope. Now we truly have each other." The following spring arrived gently, like a gift after a long winter. Morning in the quiet suburb was calm, the lawns glowing green under the golden sun. I opened the front porch door, a cup of hot coffee in my hand, its aroma drifting through the cool breeze. Hope shot into the yard in her new wheelchair. The little wheels rolled smoothly over the grass, her body leaning forward, ears perked high, brown eyes gleaming like amber. She chased sparrows, barking loudly, her voice echoing into the wide sky. Rusty sat on the porch, his old eyes following her, his tail swaying softly as if proud of his younger sister. I sat in my old wooden chair, my throat tightening as I watched. Who could believe that a year ago, Hope was nothing more than a trembling creature on a sidewalk, her back legs crushed, abandoned in the indifference of the crowd? Now, she was the very heart of this home. Every morning, she wheeled up to my bed, rested her head on the mattress, her eyes shining as if to say, "We still have each other today." And I stroked her, feeling life itself beneath her soft fur. In that moment, I knew I was no longer alone. Once my elderly neighbor, Martha, stopped by. She froze, tears filling her eyes as she saw Hope rolling across the yard in her chair. In a hushed voice, she said, "She didn't just survive. She made this whole street believe in miracles again." I smiled and wiped my own eyes. Hope never walked normally, but she didn't need to. She had found her own way to live, to be happy. She never gave up, and neither would I. That evening, as the sunset painted the sky red, I sat on the porch with Hope's head resting on my lap and Rusty curled beside me. I watched the sky darken, my heart swelling with a gratitude I could not put into words. I leaned down and whispered to Hope, "You saved me, little one. It wasn't just me saving you. You brought laughter back into this house. You brought hope back into this old heart." She lifted her eyes, glistening, then licked my hand. A small gesture, but it felt like an answer. "Thank you, too." In that moment, I knew something simple yet eternal. When we save a life, sometimes that very life becomes the medicine that heals us. Hope's story didn't end in tragedy. It ended in laughter echoing across the porch, in joy spilling from a dog chasing life in the spring sun, and in a love too deep for words between a man and his little dog. If there is one lesson I've learned, it's this: kindness, no matter how small, can change a life, and sometimes it changes us. Today, as I tell this story, I have only one word to leave with you all. Thank you. Thank you, Hope, for not giving up. Thank you to the strangers who stopped that day and helped me lift her into a cardboard box. Thank you to the nurses, the doctors, and the ones who left notes of encouragement by her cage. Thank you to life itself for giving me a second chance, not just to save a life, but to rediscover the goodness I thought I had lost. And finally, thank you to everyone who is listening. Because as long as there is one heart willing to pause, one hand ready to reach out, there will always be another hope to save. And who knows, maybe that hope will be the miracle that saves you. Even now, I still can't quite believe that a shivering, abandoned life on the roadside could bring me so many tears, so much laughter, and so much hope. Hope changed my life. not with her legs, but with the strength of a heart that refused to quit. When I see her racing with that little chair, I realize miracles are not far away. They live in the moment we stop, open our hearts, and say, "You deserve to live." And now, I want to ask you, the ones listening to this story, have you ever saved a dog's life? If you have, please share it with us. Tell your story in the comments below. Because each story is a flame, and when those flames come together, the world grows brighter, warmer. Don't let dogs like Hope be left behind, trembling in darkness and loneliness. We can all do something, even something small, to let them know they are loved. If this story touched your heart, please share it. Let more people know that with just one hand reaching out, one kind look, we can save a life. And sometimes, we end up saving our own souls. Thank you for staying with me until the end. And thank you for believing that even the faintest hope is strong enough to change an entire life.